She stood before 200 of our wealthiest donors, clutching the microphone like a crown, and called me the oblivious woman living a lie. A few polite laughs rippled through the crowd until I smiled back. I spoke just one sentence, and the room froze instantly. She thought she was humiliating me, but she had actually just signed her confession on camera for my lawyer. My name is Reagan Taylor, and if there is one thing I have learned in 38 years of navigating the shark tank of high society, it is that the person holding the glass of champagne is usually more powerful than the person holding the microphone. I stood near the edge of the terrace, the cool evening air of the city brushing against my bare shoulders. I was wearing a black dress that had cost more than my first car, a garment so minimalist and severe in its cut that it served less as fashion and more as armor. I was not here to sparkle. I was here to supervise. This was the annual gala for the Hawthorne Vale Society, the single most important night on our fiscal calendar. As the director of operations, I had spent the last 6 months ensuring that every napkin was folded at a 45-degree angle and that the lighting was flattering enough to make 70-year-old donors feel like they were 50 again. The terrace was packed with the city's elite, a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns swirling under the ambient glow of string lights and the distant, twinkling skyline. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roasted duck, and old money. Standing next to me was Graham Whitlock. To the untrained eye, he was the perfect accessory to a woman in my position. He was tall, with the kind of jawline that suggested he had never heard the word no in his entire life, and a smile that could charm the PIN code out of a bank manager. He had one hand resting possessively on the small of my back, his thumb tracing idle circles against the fabric of my dress. He looked the part of the devoted partner, the supportive boyfriend who was just happy to be in the orbit of the woman running the show. "You have outdone yourself, Reagan," Graham whispered, leaning down so his breath tickled my ear. "The board is going to be eating out of your hand by midnight. I have already heard 3 people ask who organized this." I allowed myself a small, tight smile. "We need to hit 2 million in pledges before dessert is served. Graham, flattery does not pay the venue rental." "You are always so serious," he chuckled, squeezing my waist. "Relax, the night is perfect." For a moment, I almost believed him. I almost let myself lean into his touch, to accept the security he offered. We had been together for 2 years, and in that time, he had woven himself into the fabric of my life so thoroughly that I sometimes forgot where I ended and he began. He had a key to my apartment. He drove my car. He knew my coffee order and my mother's birthday. He was the safe harbor I had allowed myself to dock in after years of sailing through storms alone. But then the music shifted. The polite jazz quartet faded out, and the spotlight swung aggressively toward the small stage at the north end of the terrace. It was time for the donor appreciation speeches, a segment of the evening I had choreographed down to the second. I checked my watch. It was exactly 9:15. The chairman was supposed to walk up now. Instead, a flash of red silk cut through the crowd. Sloane Mercer stepped onto the stage. She was younger than me, perhaps 26 or 27, with the kind of frantic energy that people often mistake for charisma. She was not on the schedule. She was not a board member. She was not a major donor. She was, as far as I knew, a +1 of a minor corporate sponsor, a girl who worked in public relations and had been lingering around the periphery of our social circle for a few months. The microphone made a sharp feedback screech as she grabbed it from the stand, causing several guests to wince. The murmur of conversation died down, replaced by a confused silence. "Hello, everyone!" Sloane's voice boomed through the speakers, a little too loud, a little too breathless. She giggled, swaying slightly. I know, I am not on the list, but I just felt so inspired by all the love in this room tonight. Truly, it is just so intoxicating." I felt Graham stiffen beside me. His hand froze on my back. I glanced at him, expecting to see annoyance. Instead, I saw panic. It was a raw, primal fear that stripped the handsome veneer right off his face. "I wanted to make a special toast," Sloane continued, her eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto us. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It was a predatory grin, sharp and white. To Reagan Taylor, the spotlight swung, blinding me for a second before settling. A ripple of applause started, polite and confused, but Sloane held up a hand to stop it. No, wait, she cooed into the microphone, her voice dripping with a sickly sweetness. I want to thank Reagan, really. I want to thank her for being so busy, for being so dedicated to her job, for being so completely, utterly oblivious. The air on the terrace seemed to drop 10 degrees. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a car crash. Because if she wasn't so distracted saving the world one gala at a time, Sloane said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that echoed across the entire rooftop. She might have noticed that her perfect boyfriend, Graham, has actually been with me for the last 5 months. A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a few nervous, scattered laughs. People thought it was a skit, a roast, a part of the entertainment, but then they looked at Graham. Graham looked like he was having a cardiac event. His skin had turned the color of wet ash. He pulled his hand away from my back as if I were on fire. Sloane wasn't finished. She was enjoying this. She was clutching the microphone like it was a scepter, basking in the shock of 200 people. Oh, do not look so shocked, Graham, she laughed, a brittle sound. I got tired of waiting in the car. Baby, I thought it was time Reagan knew that while she is planning parties, you are planning a future with someone who actually knows how to make you feel like a man. Poor Reagan, living the wrong life in the wrong role. The scattered laughter died instantly. This was not a skit. This was a public execution. I could feel the eyes of everyone I worked for, everyone I respected, and everyone I needed to impress, burning into me. They were waiting for the reaction. They were waiting for the tears, the scream, the drink thrown in the face. They were waiting for the hysterical woman to make a scene that they could gossip about over brunch for the next 3 years. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird, but my face remained a mask of bored indifference. I had spent a lifetime training for high-pressure situations. I had managed crises where millions of dollars were on the line. I handled disasters for a living. This was just another disaster. I did not look at the crowd. I did not look at the ground. I turned my head slowly, deliberately, to look at Graham. He was trembling. He opened his mouth to speak, to stammer some excuse, but no sound came out. He was a man drowning on dry land. Then, I looked at Sloane. She was beaming on stage, chest heaving with the adrenaline of her performance. She thought she had won. She thought she had just destroyed me. She thought that by humiliating me, she had claimed him. I reached out and picked up my glass of champagne from the high-top table beside us. The movement was slow, fluid, and completely steady. I took a sip, I swallowed, and then, with the precision of a surgeon, I set the glass back down. The sharp clink of the crystal hitting the glass table seemed to echo in the dead silence of the room. I walked forward, not toward the exit, toward the stage. I stopped at the base of the platform, just below where Sloane was standing. I did not need a microphone to command the room, but there was a roving mic on a stand near the front, intended for the Q&A session later. I reached out and tilted it toward me. I looked up at Sloane. I did not look angry. I looked at her the way one looks at a waiter who has brought the wrong order, mildly inconvenienced and slightly pitying. "Thank you for saying that," I said. My voice was calm, low, and perfectly modulated. It carried through the speakers with zero distortion, cutting through the night air like a razor blade. "Thank you for saying that in front of the club's cameras. My lawyer is currently drafting a suit regarding the misuse of shared assets, and he has been asking for concrete proof of the timeline. He is going to need exactly this clip." The effect was instantaneous. The smirk vanished from Sloane's face as if I had slapped her. Her grip on the microphone loosened. She blinked, once, twice, realizing too late that she had not just confessed to an affair. She had confessed to a timeline that overlapped with financial joint ventures Graham and I had signed. She had just publicly authenticated the evidence against him. The silence on the terrace shifted. It was no longer the silence of awkwardness. It was the silence of shock. The guests were not looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at Sloane with the realization that she was the one in the trap. I turned my back on her. She was no longer relevant. I turned to Graham. He was standing alone in the center of the crowd, the guests having unconsciously created a circle of empty space around him, distancing themselves from the contamination of his failure. He looked small. He looked cheap. The tuxedo suddenly looked like a costume he had rented. I walked past him. I did not stop. I did not slow down. But as I passed his shoulder, I leaned in just enough so that only he could hear me, though the microphone I was still holding near my side picked up the whisper and threw it like a grenade into the room. "Tonight, you are going to see what it is like to be clowned, Graham," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth, any love, any history. "But it will not be me." I kept walking. I headed straight for the double doors leading to the executive suite, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the marble floor. Behind me, the room remained frozen, a tableau of wealth and scandal suspended in time. I did not look back. The gala was over for me, but the war had just begun, and unlike them, I had brought ammunition to understand why I did what I did on that terrace. You have to understand the architecture of my life before the demolition began. I am not a woman who thrives on chaos. I am the director of operations for the Hawthorne Vale Society, which means my entire existence is predicated on the elimination of variables. I am the invisible hand that ensures the wine is always chilled to exactly 55 degrees, and that the egos of billionaires are stroked with the precision of a master painter. My job is to make the impossible look effortless, to create a world where the wealthy feel not just served, but worshipped when a member walks into one of my events. They are not just entering a room, they are entering a carefully curated reality where their every desire is anticipated before they even know they have it. I built my personal life with the same rigorous attention to detail. I did not believe in fairy tales. I believed in structures. I believed in foundations. I believed that love was not a lightning bolt that struck you from the sky, but a house you built brick by brick, day after day, through shared values and mutual respect. Enter Graham Whitlock. We met 18 months ago during the initial planning phase of a corporate sponsorship deal. He was representing a mid-sized investment firm that wanted to buy its way into our inner circle. He was not the wealthiest man I had ever met, nor was he the most handsome, though he certainly held his own in a tuxedo. What he was, however, was safe. He had a way of looking at you that made the rest of the room disappear. He knew exactly when to speak, and more importantly, when to listen. In a world full of men who loved the sound of their own voices, Graham was a soothing silence. He courted me with the persistence of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. He did not play games. He called when he said he would call. He showed up 5 minutes early for dinner reservations. He sent flowers not to apologize, but just because it was a Tuesday. For a woman who spent 12 hours a day managing the erratic whims of the elite, Graham felt like a calm harbor. He felt like the one variable I did not have to manage. I let my guard down. It was a slow process, like a heavy door creaking open on rusted hinges. But I let him in. Graham did not just move into my life. He seeped into it. It started with a toothbrush in the guest bathroom. Then it was a drawer in my dresser. Then it was a key to my apartment. A copy I had made for him one morning after he made me coffee while I was rushing to a board meeting. It felt natural. It felt right. We started talking about the future in the concrete terms I understood. We discussed real estate. We discussed investment portfolios. We even discussed retirement timelines. He would drop hints about ring sizes, making jokes about how he needed to start saving up for something worthy of my standards. I began to rely on him. That was the mistake. I allowed myself to believe that the partnership we were building was equal. I was the one who handled the logistics of our lives. Of course. I paid the bills. I organized the trips. I managed the social calendar. But I thought he was contributing the emotional equity. I thought he was the soft place to land. But a good manager notices when the data points start to drift. It began with the phone. Graham had always been casual with his devices, leaving them on the counter, screen up, buzzing with notifications he would ignore to talk to me. Then, about 4 months ago, the phone started living in his pocket. When he did set it down, it was always face down, always. It was a small shift, a micro-adjustment in behavior that most people would miss. But I notice when a waiter places a fork half an inch off alignment. I certainly noticed when my boyfriend started guarding his digital life like a state secret. Then came the schedule anomalies. Graham was a creature of habit. He went to the gym at 6 in the morning, worked until 6 in the evening, and was home by 7. Suddenly, there were emergency client dinners. There were strategy sessions that ran until midnight. There were weekend conferences that required him to drive 2 hours out of town. I did not confront him. That is not my style. I do not scream. I do not throw accusations around like confetti. I observe. I gathered data. I watched him the way I watch a vendor who I suspect is overcharging me for linens. I looked for the patterns. He started mentioning a name, a friend in PR. He never used her name at first. It was always just, my friend in PR or this contact I have. He would bring her up in casual conversation, testing the waters, normalizing her existence in our narrative. My friend in PR thinks we should target the tech sector for the next quarter, he would say over dinner, swirling his red wine. Oh, I would reply, cutting my steak. She sounds knowledgeable. She is sharp, he would say, a little too enthusiastically. Young, hungry, reminds me of you when you started. He thought that was a compliment. I heard it for what it was, a comparison. I continued to work. The gala was approaching, and the stakes were higher than usual this year. I had been lobbying the board for 3 years to establish an internal scholarship fund for underprivileged students interested in hospitality management. I wanted to name it after my mother, a woman who had scrubbed floors in hotels so I could learn how to run them. The board had finally agreed. On the condition that this year's gala raised a record-breaking amount, this event was my heart on a platter. Graham knew this. He knew how much it meant to me. He had held me while I cried the night the board approved the proposal. He had told me he was so proud of me. That is the part that twists the knife. He knew exactly how busy I was. He knew I was drowning in contracts and seating charts and menu tastings. He used my ambition as his cover. He banked on the fact that I would be too exhausted, too focused on the big picture, to notice the cracks in my own floorboards. One Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks before the gala, I was going through our shared household expenses. We did not have a joint bank account for everything, but we used a shared credit card for groceries, utilities, and household items. I was categorizing the expenses in my spreadsheet, a monthly ritual I actually enjoyed for its orderliness. I was scrolling through the list. Whole Foods, the electric company, the dry cleaners. When I stopped, there was a transfer. It was not on the credit card statement. It was on a bank statement I had pulled from the pile of mail Graham had left on the kitchen island. He had opened it and left it there, likely intending to file it later. Graham was messy like that. He assumed I would clean it up. I picked up the paper. It was a transfer from his personal checking account, which was odd, because he usually kept that money for his car payments and student loans. The amount was small, $60, then another for $90, then one for $120. They were labeled with vague descriptions like consulting services or design help. But one entry, dated 2 months prior, had slipped through the net of discretion. It was a Venmo transfer that had been auto-reflected in the bank ledger because of the amount. It read, "Transfer to Sloan Mercer. Thank you." Sloan. The name hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was not a common name. I stared at the paper, the black ink stark against the white background. I did not know a Sloan. Graham had never introduced me to a Sloan, and yet, here she was, living in the line items of his financial history. I went to my laptop. I did not go to Instagram or Facebook. I went to the state business registry. I typed in the name. Sloan Mercer. A business license popped up. Mercer PR brand strategy. Registered 4 months ago. The address was a residential apartment in the trendy downtown district. A building I knew well because we had hosted a rooftop mixer there last summer. I sat back in my chair. The hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment. The pieces clicked together with a sickening precision. The friend in PR, the late nights, the phone face down, the sudden need for consulting services. He was not just cheating on me, he was funding it, and based on the dates, he had started seeing her right around the time he had told me he wanted to look at engagement rings. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, radiating outward to my fingertips. It was not rage. Rage is hot. Rage is chaotic. This was something else. This was the cold, hard clarity of a structural engineer realizing the bridge is unsound. I looked around the apartment. I saw his jacket draped over the back of the sofa. I saw his running shoes by the door. I saw the framed photo of us on the mantel, taken at a vineyard last autumn, where we looked like the perfect, happy couple. He had built a nest here with me. He was eating my food, sleeping in my bed, living the life I had curated for us, and all the while, he was siphoning off resources, time, money, emotion, to build a satellite office with a girl named Sloane. I did not cry. I did not throw the vase against the wall. I simply folded the bank statement and placed it inside my work folder. I had a gala to plan. I had a scholarship to launch. And now, I had a new project to manage. I realized then that Graham had made a critical error in judgment. He thought Reagan Taylor was just a girlfriend. He forgot that Reagan Taylor was a woman who caught discrepancies for a living. He thought he was playing a game of hearts, where he could bluff his way through. He did not realize he was playing a game of chess with a woman who had already memorized the board. The name Sloane Mercer burned in my mind, not as a rival, but as a key that was going to unlock every lie he had told me for the last 6 months. I closed my laptop. The investigation had officially begun. I would let him think he was safe. I would let him think I was the oblivious, busy little worker bee. I would let him get comfortable. Because the only thing more satisfying than catching a thief is watching him walk right into the vault you have already locked from the outside. Most people believe that an affair is discovered through the scent of foreign perfume on a collar or a lipstick stain on a cheek. But in my experience, betrayal is rarely that poetic. Betrayal is a math problem. It is a series of data points that drift away from the baseline, a statistical anomaly that demands an audit. And I am, first and foremost, an auditor of my own life. I sat at the mahogany desk in our home office, the only light coming from the glow of my dual monitors. Graham was asleep in the other room. I could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of his breathing through the open door. A sound that used to comfort me, but now sounded like the ticking of a countdown clock. I was not sleeping. I was working. But I was not working on the Hawthorne Vale Gala. I was working on the ledger of Graham Whitlock. Once I had seen that first transfer to Sloane Mercer, the dam broke. I did not storm into the bedroom and shake him awake. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did what any good director of operations would do when facing a potential embezzlement of emotional and financial assets. I initiated a forensic review. I pulled up the last 12 months of our shared expenses. We had a joint credit card that we used for household incidentals, groceries, utility bills, the occasional dinner out. Graham contributed 40%, and I contributed 60%, a ratio we had agreed upon based on our incomes. It was a system built on trust. I filtered the search results. I looked for the small, innocuous charges that usually fly under the radar, and there they were. $60, $90, $120. They appeared with a rhythmic regularity, like a heartbeat, every Tuesday and Thursday. Almost without fail, the merchant descriptors were deliberately vague. Digital services, support fee, consulting retainer, to the untrained eye. They looked like subscriptions to software, or perhaps some online gaming service. But I knew Graham's digital footprint. He still used a Hotmail account from college. He did not pay for consulting. I clicked on the transaction details for a charge of $120 made 3 weeks prior. The location code was local. I cross-referenced the merchant ID with a business directory database I had access to through the club. The merchant name was listed as Mercer Strategy Group. He was paying her through our grocery money. He was buying her affection, or perhaps her silence, using the same account we used to buy milk and eggs. It was not just infidelity. It was a misappropriation of funds. It was sloppy. It was insulting. I did not print the pages. Paper leaves a trail. Instead, I took high-resolution screenshots of every single incriminating transaction. I organized them by date. I created a digital folder on my private cloud drive, encrypted with a password Graham would never guess. The date my father died. I called it the silent file. As I pieced together the timeline, a picture began to emerge. Graham was not just sleeping with this woman. He was building a parallel infrastructure with her. The payments correlated with the nights he was working late. The $90 charges often appeared on Friday afternoons, right before he would come home and tell me he was too tired to go out. He was funding a second life, dollar by dollar, right under my nose. But the true shock came 2 nights later. It was a Wednesday. Graham had come home early, looking flushed and excited. He told me he needed to print some urgent documents for a client meeting the next morning and that his office printer was down. He asked to use my desktop. I had agreed. Of course, I was in the kitchen making risotto, playing the part of the supportive partner. He had spent 10 minutes in the office, printed 3 pages, and then joined me for dinner, charming and attentive, after he went to shower. I walked into the office to check my email. He had closed his browser window, but he had not logged out of his personal email account, and he had forgotten to close the downloads folder. Sitting at the top of the list was a PDF file named confirmation_res_7782. My hand hovered over the mouse. I knew I should not look. I knew that once I clicked that file, there was no going back to the ignorance I had lived in just a week ago. But I am not a woman who turns away from the fire. I am the woman who walks into it to see what is burning. I double-clicked. It was a reservation for the Hotel Lucerne, a boutique hotel downtown known for its discretion and its $400 a night price tag. The reservation was for a deluxe king suite. The check-in date was for the upcoming weekend. The weekend I was scheduled to be at the club for 18 hours a day supervising the final gala load-in. He had told me he was going to visit his parents in Connecticut that weekend, but it was the guest list that made my blood run cold. Primary guest: Graham Whitlock. Secondary guest: Sloan Mercer. And there, at the bottom of the page, under payment method, was the detail that turned my shock into a cold. Hard resolve. Visa ending in 4498. That was not Graham's card. That was the joint emergency card. The one with the $20,000 limit that I had insisted we open for catastrophic events, like a burst pipe or a medical emergency. He was using our emergency fund to finance a weekend of champagne and room service with his mistress, while I worked myself to the bone to secure his social standing. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its narcissism. He felt so entitled to my resources that he did not even bother to hide the theft. He thought I was so busy, so distracted by the gala, that I would never check the statement for a card we never used. I saved the PDF to the silent file. Then, I cleared the download history, closed his email, and wiped the browser cache. I left the room exactly as I had found it. When Graham came out of the shower, smelling of my expensive body wash, I smiled at him. I asked him if he had printed everything he needed. He kissed my forehead and told me I was the best. I told him to sleep well. I did not sleep well. I lay awake and thought about the gala. The next morning, I arrived at the Hawthorne Vale Society offices at 7 o'clock. The club was quiet, the cleaners still polishing the marble floors of the lobby. I went straight to my office and pulled the master file for the gala sponsorship agreements. Graham had been very helpful over the last month, offering to reach out to some of his contacts to fill the lower-tier sponsorship slots. We had needed a few more $5,000 contributions to hit our target. And Graham had proudly brought in 3 new companies. I had been grateful. I had thanked him for taking the initiative. I pulled the contracts for those 3 companies. 2 of them were legitimate local businesses, a landscaping firm and a boutique law office, but the third one gave me pause: Mercer Brand Solutions. It was listed as a gold-tier sponsor, which meant a $5,000 donation in exchange for a half-page ad in the program and 2 tickets to the event. I looked at the address on the contract: 422 West Oak Street, Suite 4B. I opened a new tab on my browser and typed in the address. It was a residential apartment building. I cross-referenced it with the address I had found on Sloan Mercer's business license. It was a match. Graham had not just brought in a sponsor. He had brought in Sloan. He had arranged for his mistress to be a corporate sponsor of the event I was organizing. He had literally invited her into my house. But then I looked closer at the payment details for the sponsorship. The check had been cut from a business account, but the signature at the bottom of the contract caught my eye. It was Graham's handwriting. It was a messy scrawl, but I knew the way he crossed his T's. He had signed on behalf of the company. I realized then what was happening. Graham was not just cheating. He was laundering Sloan's reputation. He was using the Hawthorne Vale Society Gala, the most exclusive event of the year, to debut her company to the city's elite. He was going to use my event, my hard work, and my connections to launch her career. He wanted her in that room, rubbing shoulders with the board members, handing out business cards, legitimate because she was a sponsor. He was building a stage for her. My first instinct was to shred the contract. I could cancel it right now. I could cite a conflict of interest. I could ban her from the building. I could fire Graham from my life via text message and have security escort him out if he showed up. But then I thought about the text messages. I thought about the $60 here, the $90 there. I thought about the hotel room paid for with my money. I thought about the way he had looked me in the eye and told me he loved me while planning a weekend away with her. If I stopped this now, it would just be a breakup. It would be a messy, emotional split where he would tell everyone I was crazy and jealous. He would spin the narrative. He would say I was controlling. He would walk away with his reputation intact, and he would probably still take her to the Hotel Lucerne. No, that was not enough. I looked at the contract again. Mercer Brand Solutions. If Graham wanted to bring Sloan into the light, I would let him. If he wanted a stage, I would give him the biggest stage in the city. Because the thing about bright lights is that they do not just illuminate beauty. They illuminate flaws. They illuminate cracks. And they illuminate crimes. I placed the contract back in the folder. I smoothed the edges. I picked up my phone and called my assistant. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady and professional, "please ensure that the logo for Mercer Brand Solutions is included in the final print of the program, and make sure their seats are assigned. I want them at table 12. Table 12 was not a bad table. It was right in the center of the room. It had a perfect view of the stage. And more importantly, the stage had a perfect view of table 12. I hung up the phone. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The anxiety of the what-ifs was gone. I knew the facts. I knew the players. And now, I knew the game. Graham thought he was playing me. He thought he was the director of this little drama. But he had forgotten that I was the one who controlled the venue. I was the one who controlled the microphone. And I was the one who controlled the guest list. I would let the gala happen. I would let Sloan walk in her red dress. I would let Graham parade her around as a business associate. I would let them think they had gotten away with it. Because when you trap a rat, you do not spring the mechanism the moment it sniffs the cheese. You wait until it is fully inside the cage. You wait until the door is the only way out. I turned back to my computer and opened the silent file one last time. I added a new note at the bottom of the document. Objective: total exposure. I closed the laptop. It was time to get dressed for work. I had a party to plan, and it was going to be a night that Graham Whitlock and Sloan Mercer would remember for the rest of their lives. The morning of the gala did not begin with panic. It began with the quiet, rhythmic humming of a machine that had been perfectly calibrated. While Graham slept in, likely dreaming of the speech he thought he was going to make, or the life he thought he was stealing, I was already at the Hawthorne Vale Society. moving pieces on a board he did not even know existed. If betrayal is a chaotic act, then revenge is an act of extreme order. It requires logistics. It requires permits. It requires a paper trail so wide and so deep that no amount of charm can bridge the gap. My first meeting was with the audiovisual team at 9 in the morning. Usually for these events, we only record the keynote speaker and the auctioneer. The rest of the night is allowed to dissolve into the ether of memory and alcohol. But today, I had new instructions. I stood in the center of the ballroom, the floor still covered in protective plastic, looking up at the sound booth. The lead technician, a man named Dave, who had worked with me for 5 years, leaned over the railing. "Dave," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty cavern of the room. "I need a change in the recording protocol for tonight. I want a full feed recording of the entire evening, floor microphones, stage microphones, and the ambient feeds. All of it needs to be routed to the secure archive server in real time." Dave looked confused. He adjusted his headset. "That is a lot of data. Reagan, we usually just cut the highlights." "You want the dead air too?" "I want everything," I said, my tone brokering no argument. "We are launching the Taylor Scholarship Fund tonight. I want to capture every candid moment, every impromptu speech, every reaction for the documentary reel we might produce next year. It needs to be raw and high quality." It was a lie, but it was a lie wrapped in the unassailable armor of charity. No one questions a woman trying to honor her mother's legacy. Dave gave me a thumbs up. The trap was set. Whatever happened on that stage, whatever words were spoken by anyone foolish enough to grab a live microphone, would be preserved in high-definition audio and video. It would not be hearsay. It would be evidence. Next came the seating chart. In the world of high society fundraising, the seating chart is not just a map. It is a hierarchy. It tells you who matters, who is on their way up, and who is on their way out. I walked over to the large easel where the floor plan was displayed. I held a red marker in my hand. I found table 12. This was where I had assigned Mercer Brand Solutions. It was a prime spot, central and visible. Graham likely thought I had given him a favor by placing his client there. He did not realize that the center of the room is also the most exposed position on the battlefield. I looked at the tables surrounding table 12. Originally, I had placed some of our younger, more rowdy tech donors there. They were loud and forgiving of social gaffes. I uncapped the marker and moved them to the balcony. In their place, I moved table 4. Table 4 consisted of Maren Duval and the ethics committee of the board. Maren was 70 years old, draped in pearls and rigid principles. She was the moral compass of the society. A woman who believed that scandal was a stain that could never be dry cleaned out. If a spoon dropped during a toast, Maren noticed. If a mistress made a scene, Maren would not just notice, she would judge. And her judgment determined who stayed in the club and who was exiled. I placed Maren and her husband directly in the line of sight of table 12. When Sloane stood up, and I knew she would, because Graham had been feeding her ego for months, she would not just be standing up to me, she would be performing directly for the executioner. By noon, I had made one more critical addition to the guest list. I called Elias Thorne. Elias was my personal attorney, a man who charged $600 an hour and had a smile like a shark. He was not a member of the club, and usually, he would have no reason to attend a social gala. "I need you there tonight." "Elias," I told him over the phone as I reviewed the floral arrangements. He paused. "Reagan, I do not do cocktails. I do contracts. Unless you're planning to arrest someone during the appetizer course, I would rather stay home. I am not arresting anyone," I said, examining a white orchid for imperfections. "But I suspect there will be a significant breach of a cohabitation agreement and potential misuse of funds occurring publicly. I need a witness who is not drinking the punch. I entered you as a guest of the gold sponsor. You are officially sitting with the legal counsel of the First National Bank. You will have plenty to talk about." Elias was silent for a moment, and then I heard a low chuckle. "You are up to something." "Reagan, I am just managing risk." "Elias, I will see you at 7. I hung up. The stage was set. The audience was curated. The legal team was in place. Now, I just needed the actors to arrive. I spent the afternoon assembling the physical component of my revenge. In my office, with the blinds drawn, I put together a single manila envelope. It was not thick, but it was dense. It contained the printed screenshots of the bank transfers. It contained the email confirmation for the Hotel Lucerne. It contained the copy of the sponsorship contract signed by Graham on behalf of Sloane's company, and right on top, I placed a single sheet of paper with a timeline I had typed out that morning. Date of cohabitation agreement signature. Date of first transfer to Sloane Mercer. Date of joint account overdraft. It was a story told in numbers. I sealed the envelope and placed it in my leather work tote, right next to my tablet and my lipstick. I would not need it during the party. I would need it for the aftermath. Graham arrived at 5:30. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, the very picture of the supportive partner. He came into my office, where I was touching up my makeup, and kissed me on the cheek. "You look tired." "Babe," he said, his voice laced with that faux concern that used to make me feel cared for, but now just made my skin crawl. "You have been running around like crazy." "I am fine," I said, not looking away from the mirror as I applied a layer of crimson lipstick. "Just want everything to be perfect." He sat on the edge of my desk, swinging one leg. "You know, I was telling my friend, the one from the PR firm, how lucky I am. Most women would be blowing up my phone if I had been working as late as I have been lately. But you are a professional. You get it. You are not plagued by that petty jealousy stuff." I paused, the lipstick hovering an inch from my mouth. The irony was so thick, I could almost taste it. He thought my silence was permission. He thought my lack of questions was a sign of submission, not preparation. I turned to him and smiled. It was a sharp, bright smile. "I value competence, Graham. In work and in life, I do not have time for jealousy. I only have time for results." He beamed, taking the compliment at face value. "That is why you are the best." He checked his watch. "I am going to go check on the table for Mercer Solutions. Make sure they are settled. Sloane, Ms. Mercer, said she might be here a bit early to network. Is that okay?" "It is perfectly fine," I said. "In fact, I look forward to meeting her." Finally, Graham left the office, a spring in his step. He thought he was managing me. He thought he was smoothing the runway for his girlfriend. He had no idea he was checking the lock on his own cell. Sloane arrived at 6:15. The doors did not officially open until 7. But she breezed past security with the confidence of someone who had been told she owned the building. I watched her from the mezzanine level before I went down. She was wearing a dress that was not appropriate for a charity gala. It was a screaming shade of red, cut low in the front and back, designed to pull focus. It was a look-at-me dress. It was a dress worn by a woman who believed she was the main character in a romantic comedy where the boring wife gets dumped in the third act. She was standing by the bar, which was not yet open, tapping her nails on the marble counter. Graham was standing next to her, whispering something that made her giggle. I adjusted my black dress, smoothed my hair, and walked down the grand staircase. When I approached them, Graham jumped slightly, creating a guilty inch of space between them. Sloane, however, did not move. She turned to me, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, looking for flaws. She saw a woman in a severe black gown, no jewelry except small diamond studs, holding a clipboard. In her eyes, I looked like staff. "Reagan," Graham said, his voice too loud. "This is Sloane Mercer, the sponsor I told you about." Sloane extended a hand. Her grip was limp, dismissive. So nice to finally put a face to the name. She said, "Graham talks about how hard you work all the time. It must be exhausting." She emphasized the word exhausting in a way that implied I looked old. I took her hand. My grip was firm, professional, the handshake of a woman who signs 6-figure checks. "Welcome to Hawthorne Vale, Ms. Mercer," I said, my voice smooth and devoid of any friction. "We are delighted to have your company's support tonight. I saw your placement at table 12. I hope the view is to your liking." Sloane smirked. pulling her hand back. "Oh, I am sure it will be. I like being in the center of the action." "I am sure you do," I replied. Graham looked between us, sensing a frequency he could not quite tune into. He looked nervous, but Sloane's confidence seemed to settle him. He saw two women being polite. He saw his plan working. "I have a few final checks to run with the catering team," I said, stepping back. "Enjoy the evening. The champagne will be flowing shortly." I walked away. I did not look back, but I could feel Sloane's eyes on me. She was whispering to Graham now, probably telling him how stiff I was, how boring, how easy it would be to knock me off my pedestal. I went to the security room and checked the camera feeds. I saw Elias arrive and take his seat near the back, nursing a sparkling water. I saw Marin Duval arrive, her expression stern as she inspected the table setting at table 4. I saw the audiovisual team giving the thumbs up. The room was filling up. 200 of the city's wealthiest, most influential people were taking their places. The air was buzzing with anticipation. I pulled out my phone. It was 6:55, 5 minutes until the official welcome. I opened my messages and found Graham's name. I could see him on the monitor, standing near the stage, laughing at something a donor was saying, with Sloane hovering just a little too close to his elbow. I typed a single message. "Tonight I will do exactly one thing. Make sure you watch closely." I hit send, on the screen. I saw Graham reach into his pocket. I saw him look at the phone. I saw a frown crease his forehead. He looked up, scanning the room, trying to find me in the shadows. But I was not in the shadows. I was walking toward the stage entrance. Stepping into the light, the game of chess was over. It was time to flip the board. The heavy double doors of the terrace swung shut behind me, severing the noise of the gala as cleanly as a guillotine blade. One moment, there was the hum of 200 whispered conversations and the static of a dropped microphone. The next, there was only the aggressive silence of the service corridor and the rhythmic clicking of my heels on the linoleum. I did not run. Running implies flight, and flight implies fear. I walked with the measured pace of a woman who was simply moving from one meeting to another. I checked my watch. It was 9:38 in the evening. The entire interaction on stage had taken less than 90 seconds, yet it had shifted the tectonic plates of my entire life. I could hear the doors burst open behind me. The heavy thud of frantic footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. "Reagan! Reagan! Wait!" It was Graham. His voice was ragged, stripped of the smooth baritone he reserved for donors and clients. It was high, thin, and desperate. I did not stop. I continued toward the service elevator, my hand reaching out to press the call button. "Reagan, please!" He scrambled in front of me, blocking my path to the elevator. He was breathless, a sheen of sweat already breaking out across his forehead. His eyes were wide, darting around the hallway as if looking for an audience. But there was no one here, just us, the fluorescent lights, and the ruin he had brought upon himself. "You have to listen to me. It was a joke. It was just a bad skit. Sloane has a warped sense of humor. You know how these creative types are." I stopped then. I looked at him, really looked at him. For 2 years, I had seen a partner. I had seen a future father. I had seen a man of substance. Now, under the harsh glare of the hallway lights, I saw him for what he was, a panicked child who had broken a vase and was trying to blame gravity. "A joke," I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, a joke." He laughed, a manic, bubbling sound. "She was trying to roast us, like a comedy thing. I did not know she was going to say that specific stuff. I swear. Reagan, you know I love you. You know I would never." I raised my hand. I did not slap him. I simply held up my palm. Fingers splayed, a universal sign to halt. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. "Graham," I said, "you are laboring under the delusion that I am a girlfriend you need to placate. I am not. I am the director of operations for this building, and you are currently obstructing a staff corridor. Reagan, baby." "Do not," I said, my voice dropping an octave. Do not call me that, and do not waste your breath lying to me. The time for stories is over. You can save your creative writing for the legal deposition." He blanched. "Deposition? Reagan, come on. Do not be dramatic. We can fix this. Go back out there. Take the mic. Laugh it off. Tell them we are in on it. Please. My boss is out there. If this looks real." "It is real," I said. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. I stepped inside and turned to face him. He made a move to follow me, but I placed my hand on the rubber safety bumper, holding the door open just long enough to deliver the final instruction. "Do not follow me to my office. Do not go back to my apartment. And do not speak to me again unless my attorney, Elias Thorne, is present. He is sitting at table 8. I suggest you find him before he finishes his drink." I removed my hand. The doors slid shut, sealing him in the hallway, a man alone in the harsh light of his own making. I took the elevator down to the security control room on the mezzanine level. This was the nerve center of the building, a dark room filled with glowing monitors and the hum of cooling fans. Dave, the head of a V, was sitting at the main console, looking like he had just watched a ghost walk across the screens. When I entered, he spun his chair around. "Reagan, I did not know what to do. The feed. Is it recorded?" I asked, walking straight to the bank of monitors. "Yes," Dave said, clearing his throat. "We got the whole thing. The audio is crystal clear. Reagan, what the hell was that?" I ignored the question. I looked at the screens. On the main monitor, I could see the terrace. The party had not recovered. The music had started again. A nervous, upbeat jazz track that felt completely incongruous with the tension in the room. But the camera I was interested in was the one focused on the stage. Sloane was still there. She looked diminished. The spotlight was still on her, but the triumphant glow was gone. She was holding the microphone loosely at her side, looking out at the crowd. She had expected applause. She had expected laughter. She had expected to be the heroine who exposed the cold, unloving career woman. Instead, she was facing 200 of the most judgmental people in the city, and they were looking at her like she was a stain on the carpet. I watched as a waiter walked onto the stage, not to offer her a drink, but to gently guide her away from the microphone stand. Sloane looked confused. She looked toward the crowd, searching for Graham, but Graham was still in the hallway, trying to figure out how to spin a disaster that had already been archived. "Dave," I said, my eyes fixed on the screen where Sloane was now arguing with the waiter. "I want that footage pulled immediately. Create 3 copies, one on the secure server, one on a physical hard drive, and one sent directly to my encrypted email. Do it now." "On it," Dave said, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. "Do you want me to cut the feed to the terrace screens?" "No," I said. "Let the cameras roll. If she throws a tantrum, I want that in high definition too." I turned and walked out of the control room, heading toward the executive suite. As I passed the catering staging area, Sarah, my assistant, intercepted me. She looked terrified. "Reagan," she whispered, clutching her clipboard to her chest. "Mrs. Vanderhoven is asking for you. She is furious. She asked me, 'Who is that trashy girl, and why is she shouting about your director's sex life during my dessert?'" I almost smiled. Mrs. Vanderhoven was one of our biggest donors, a woman who considered loud chewing to be a moral failing. If Sloane had offended her, Sloane was finished in this town. "Tell Mrs. Vanderhoven that the situation is being handled," I told Sarah calmly. "Tell her that the woman was an unvetted guest of a junior sponsor and that security is removing the disturbance. Apologize for the interruption and send a bottle of the 1998 Dom Perignon to her table with my compliments." "Okay," Sarah breathed, nodding. "And are you okay?" "Graham, I mean." "I am working." "Sarah," I said, "go send the champagne." She nodded and scurried off. I entered my office and locked the door. For the first time in 3 hours, I was alone. I leaned back against the heavy wood of the door and closed my eyes. I took one deep breath. then another. I waited for the tears. I waited for the heartbreak to buckle my knees. But it did not come. The part of me that could be heartbroken had been cauterized days ago when I found the hotel reservation. All that was left now was the cold machinery of resolution. I walked to my desk and picked up my personal phone. I had 12 missed calls, all from Graham. I ignored them and dialed a number I had memorized years ago. It rang twice. "Reagan?" The voice on the other end was sharp, crisp, and devoid of unnecessary pleasantries. It was Marin Duval. "Marin," I said, "I apologize for the disruption to your evening." "Disruption?" Marin snorted. "That was not a disruption, dear. That was a suicide. I am looking at the young woman right now. She is trying to explain herself to the terrified bartender. She looks like a wet cat." "I assume the board will have questions," I said, sitting down in my leather chair. "The board always has questions," Marin replied. "But the only question that matters right now is this. Is it true?" "Is what true?" "What she said. About Graham. About the affair." "Yes," I said. "It is true." "I see." Marin paused. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background. "And was this little outburst her idea? Or was it a coordinated effort to embarrass the society?" "It was her idea," I said. "But Graham provided the platform. He brought her in as a sponsor. He signed the checks using funds that let us just say were not entirely his to spend." "Sloppy," Marin said, the judgment dripping from the word. "I hate sloppy men. Listen to me. Reagan, you are the best director we have had in 20 years. You increased revenue by 40%. I do not care who sleeps with whom, but I do care about the reputation of this club. If this turns into a tabloid mess, the board will look for a scapegoat." "I know," I said. "That is why I called you." "Good. Do you have documentation?" "I have everything," I said, my hand resting on the mouse of my computer. "Bank statements, emails, timelines, and as of 5 minutes ago, a 4K video recording of her confession on our stage." "Excellent," Marin said. "Send me the file. I will call an emergency ethics meeting for tomorrow morning. We will frame this as a vendor violation and a security breach. Graham will be barred from the premises before breakfast." "Thank you." "Marin, do not thank me. Just get that girl out of my sight before I have security drag her out by that cheap red dress." The line went dead. I set the phone down. It buzzed immediately. A text from Graham. "Reagan, please, I am outside your office. Let me in. It's not what it looked like. Sloan is crazy. She's obsessed with me. I was trying to break it off. That's why she did this. She wanted to blow us up because I chose you." I stared at the message. The lie was so lazy it was almost offensive. He was pivoting. He was throwing Sloan under the bus to save himself. Rewriting history in real time. 10 minutes ago, she was his future. Now, she was a crazy stalker. I did not reply. I took a screenshot. Another text came through. "I love you. You are the only one I have ever loved. We can fix this. Just open the door." Screenshot. "If you do not open the door, I am going to tell everyone that you knew about it, that you set her up. Do not play games with me. Reagan." Screenshot. The threat followed the pleading within 30 seconds. That was the real Graham. I put the phone down. I turned to my computer. I opened the folder I had created earlier in the week, the one that held the bank transfers and the hotel receipts. I right-clicked and created a new subfolder. I typed the name, Mercer Timeline. I dragged the screenshots of the texts into the folder. I dragged the audio file Dave had just emailed me into the folder. I dragged the security log showing Graham signing Sloan in as a VIP sponsor into the folder. I watched the progress bar as the files copied. It was a green line moving steadily across the screen, filling up. It looked like a download, but it felt like a weapon loading. I did not go home to cry into a pillow. I did not call my mother. I sat in the silence of my office, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face, and organized the destruction of the man who thought he could clown me. I checked the time. It was 10:15. The gala was winding down. The valet would be busy. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and picked up my bag. I had one more stop to make before I went home. I needed to drop a copy of this folder off at Elias Thorne's office. He would need it for the morning. As I walked out of the executive suite, I passed the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. My lipstick was still perfect. My hair was still in place. I did not look like a woman who had just been publicly betrayed. I looked like a woman who had just closed a very difficult, very profitable deal. And in a way, I had traded a liability for an asset. I had traded a cheating boyfriend for the absolute, undeniable moral high ground. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the garage, and waited. The night was over, but the work had just begun. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elias Thorne's office, but the temperature inside the room felt like the inside of a cryogenic freezer. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I had not slept, but I was not tired. Adrenaline is a powerful fuel, but righteous indignation is a nuclear reactor. I sat opposite Elias, watching him read. He was a man who read documents the way a sommelier tastes wine, slowly, looking for the notes of rot or the hint of a bad year. On the glass desk between us lay the contents of the manila envelope I had prepared the night before, now augmented with the fresh horrors of the morning. "This is thorough," Elias said, not looking up. He flipped a page of the bank statements I had printed. "Most clients come to me with a sob story and a crumpled tissue. You brought me a forensic audit." "I do not pay you for tissues, Elias," I said, taking a sip of the black coffee his assistant had brought me. "I pay you for leverage. Tell me what we have." Elias set the papers down and leaned back in his leather chair. He tented his fingers. "We have a lot, but the most interesting piece isn't the bank transfer log. It is this." He tapped a document I had almost forgotten about. It was the cohabitation agreement Graham and I had signed 18 months ago. At the time, Graham had sulked for 3 days about it. He had called it unromantic. He had said it felt like I was hiring him rather than moving in with him. I had stood my ground. In my line of work, you learn that handshake deals are for people who want to lose money. I had insisted on a contract that defined our financial separation and our shared liabilities. Clause 14, Section B, Elias said, a small, shark-like smile touching his lips. "I remember drafting this. You were very specific about the definition of joint resource allocation." "I remember," I said. "I wanted to ensure that if we broke up, he could not claim sweat equity in my apartment or my investments." "It does more than that," Elias corrected. "It explicitly prohibits the use of shared funds or shared credit facilities for the benefit of any third party without express written consent. It classifies such usage not as a gift, but as unauthorized diversion of assets." I sat up straighter. "So, legally speaking, Elias continued, when he used your joint emergency card to pay for the Hotel Lucerne, and when he used your household account to transfer money to Ms. Mercer, he was not just being a bad boyfriend, he was breaching a contract. This gives us grounds to freeze him out immediately. We can reclaim those funds as a debt owed." "I do not care about the money," I said. "I care about the extraction." "We will get to the extraction," Elias said. "But first, we need to secure the perimeter." He pulled a second file toward him. This was the new information, the background check on Mercer Brand Solutions that I had run at 4 a.m. when I could not stare at the ceiling any longer. "This is where it gets ugly," Elias said, his tone shifting from legal amusement to professional concern. "You were right to be suspicious of the sponsorship deal. I had my paralegal run a deep dive on Ms. Mercer's company as soon as you called me last night. And Mercer Brand Solutions is not just a small PR firm," Elias said. "It is a sinking ship. She has 3 outstanding liens against her business for unpaid vendor fees. She is currently being audited by the state for $42,000 in back taxes. The company is effectively insolvent." The air left my lungs. "Insolvent?" "She is broke, Reagan," Elias said bluntly. "She is drowning in debt. And based on the timing of these transfers from Graham, he has been acting as her life raft." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The betrayal was not just sexual, it was not even just emotional. It was a calculated business move. "The gala," I whispered, the pieces locking together in my mind. He did not just want to show her off, he wanted to sell her. "Exactly," Elias nodded. He brought her in as a sponsor, likely paying the fee himself, to put her in a room with 200 of the wealthiest people in the state. He was trying to get her contracts. He was trying to use the Hawthorne Vale Society's reputation to legitimize a company that is being hunted by the IRS. If she could land 1 or 2 clients from your donor list, she could pay off her debts. My hands curled into fists in my lap. Graham had not just cheated on me, he had exposed the society, my society, the institution I had spent 5 years protecting, to a massive liability. If a donor had hired Sloan based on our tacit endorsement, and she had defrauded them or failed to deliver because her assets were frozen by the state, the blowback would have come straight to me. "He tried to use my reputation to launder her debt," I said, my voice shaking with a cold rage. "And he failed," Elias said, "because she got greedy and decided to make a scene instead of networking. She torpedoed her own rescue boat." "What do we do?" I asked. Elias handed me a pen. "First, we sever the limb. You are going to sign this notice of revocation. It officially terminates Graham's residency rights under the breach of contract clause. He has 24 hours to vacate the premises to collect personal effects, supervised by a third party." I signed the paper without hesitation. The ink was black and permanent. "Second," Elias said, "we deal with the club. Graham is not a member, correct?" "No," I said. "He is on my guest list. He has a spousal access card." "Not anymore," Elias said. "As of this morning, he is a security risk. You have grounds to ban him." I stood up. "I will handle the club. You handle the eviction. I want the locks changed by noon tomorrow." "Consider it done," Elias said. I left his office and walked out into the busy morning street. The city was moving, alive with people going to jobs where they did not have to dismantle their personal lives before lunch. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of the Hawthorne Vale Society. On the ride over, I took out my phone. I logged into our banking app. I saw the joint credit card, the one ending in 4498. I clicked Manage Card. I selected Graham Whitlock. I hovered over the option Remove Authorized User. I pressed it. A small pop-up asked me to confirm. "Are you sure?" "Goodbye, Graham," I said to the screen, and tapped Yes. Next, I went to the checking account. I transferred the remaining balance, minus the funds I calculated he had contributed for the actual bills, into my personal savings account. I left him exactly $312, which was his share of the remaining utility cycle. I was not a thief. I was an accountant. When I arrived at the club, the atmosphere was tense. The staff knew. Of course they knew. Gossip travels faster than light in the service industry. The doorman avoided eye contact. The receptionist looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. I walked straight to the IT department. "Disable Graham Whitlock's key fob," I told the system administrator, "immediately, and flag his photo at the security desk. If he attempts to enter the building, he is to be treated as a trespasser." "Done," the admin said, typing furiously. "Do you want us to scrub his biometrics from the gym access too?" "Everything," I said. "He does not exist here anymore." I went to my office. It was time for the final move. The board was expecting a report on the gala's financials by noon. Usually, this report was a celebration of numbers. Pledges raised, costs managed. Today, it would be an autopsy. I opened a blank document. I did not write a letter about heartbreak. I did not write a letter about infidelity. I wrote a risk assessment memo. To the Board of Directors, Hawthorne Vale Society, from Reagan Taylor, Director of Operations. Subject: Urgent compliance issue regarding sponsor, vendor, Mercer Brand Solutions. I typed with the speed of a pianist playing a requiem. I outlined the facts. Vendor Mercer Brand Solutions was introduced via a personal referral from Mr. Graham Whitlock, Background checks conducted post-event reveal significant undisclosed financial liabilities, including active tax liens. Mr. Whitlock, acting as a proxy, signed sponsorship agreements on behalf of the vendor, creating a conflict of interest. The vendor's behavior at the gala, see attached Incident Report 402, caused reputational damage to the society. Mr. Whitlock used society resources, gala access, to attempt to secure business for an insolvent entity. I attached the timeline. I attached the background check Elias had given me. I attached the sponsorship contract with Graham's signature. I did not mention that I loved him. I did not mention that we lived together. I framed him purely as a rogue actor who had bypassed compliance protocols to smuggle a toxic asset into our donor pool. I hit send. The response was almost immediate. 10 minutes later, my office phone rang. It was the chairman of the board, Mr. Sterling. Reagan, his voice was grave. We just received your memo. Is this accurate? This Mercer woman is being chased by the state for taxes? Affirmative, I said. And Mr. Whitlock was attempting to leverage our member base to alleviate that debt. There was a silence on the line. A heavy, expensive silence. We cannot have this, Sterling said. If the donors find out we vetted a company with tax liens, the integrity of the scholarship fund is compromised. We sell prestige. Reagan, we sell safety. This is messy. I agree, I said. That is why I have already revoked Mr. Whitlock's access privileges and terminated the sponsorship agreement with Mercer Brand Solutions for Cause. Good, Sterling said. But we need to go further. We need to distance ourselves completely. I am calling an emergency session of the executive committee in an hour. I want you there. I will be there, I said. And Reagan? Yes, sir? Mr. Whitlock. He was well. He was a fixture here because of you. I assume you are handling that side of things? Mr. Whitlock is no longer a fixture, I said, my voice steady. He is a liability, and liabilities are written off. I hung up the phone. An hour later, I sat in the boardroom. The long oak table was polished to a mirror shine. 6 of the most powerful people in the city sat around it. They looked grim. They did not look at me with pity for a woman scorned. They looked at me with respect for a manager who had caught a leak in the hull. The conversation was brutal and short. Graham's charm, his handshake, his ability to tell a joke, none of it mattered here. In this room, he was just a number that did not add up. He was a risk. Motion to permanently ban Graham Whitlock from all society events and properties, Marin Duval said, raising her hand. Seconded, said the vice chairman. Motion carried, Sterling said. Reagan, please ensure legal sends him a formal cease and desist regarding any contact with our donors. We do not want him trying to solicit business for his girlfriend from the parking lot. I will handle it, I said, as the meeting adjourned. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it under the table. It was an alert from my bank. Transaction declined. Visa ending in 4498. Amount, $450. Merchant. The flower studio. He was trying to buy me apology flowers. He was trying to use my own money to apologize for stealing my money. I looked at the notification and felt a dark, cold amusement. He was standing in a flower shop somewhere, holding a bouquet of overpriced roses, watching a card reader tell him that his life as he knew it was over. I put the phone away and stood up to shake hands with the board members. The financial thriller was nearing its end. Now, all that was left was the final scene. Graham thought he was fighting for a relationship. He did not realize he was fighting a foreclosure, and the eviction notice was already in the mail. The adrenaline of the board meeting had faded, leaving behind a cold, clinical exhaustion. I sat in my office, the door locked, surrounded by the physical debris of a relationship that had been systematically dismantled over the last 12 hours. The eviction notice was drafted. The bank accounts were severed. The security protocols were updated. By all accounts, I had won. I had cut the infection out of my life before it could reach the bone. But something was still nagging at me. It was a small detail Elias had mentioned earlier. The sheer audacity of Graham signing a sponsorship agreement on behalf of a company that was effectively insolvent. Why would he do that? Graham was selfish, yes, but he was not stupid. He knew I reviewed every contract. He knew I had a compliance team. Signing his name as a proxy was risky, but it was a calculated risk, unless he had an insurance policy. I turned back to my computer. I did not look at the bank statements this time. I looked at the internal server logs for the Hawthorne Vale Society. I had administrative access to the entire back end of our operations, a privilege I rarely used because I trusted my department heads, but trust was a currency I could no longer afford. I filtered the search by vendor agreements and Mercer brand solutions. The system pulled up the standard contract I had seen before, the one Graham had signed, but then, tucked away in a subfolder labeled Archived Guarantees, there was a second file. It was a PDF titled credit_auth_internal_77B. I frowned. A credit authorization? We did not offer credit to new sponsors. New sponsors paid up front. That was the rule. I double-clicked the file. It opened on my screen, glowing with the harsh white light of betrayal. It was a vendor solvency guarantee. It was a document stating that the Hawthorne Vale Society would waive the upfront payment requirement for Mercer brand solutions, allowing them to pay net 60 days after the gala. Essentially, it allowed Sloan to get the exposure of the sponsorship without paying a single dime until 2 months later, and at the bottom of the page was a signature, Reagan Taylor. I stopped breathing. I stared at the signature. It was my name. It was my loop on the R. It was my sharp, aggressive cross on the T. But I had never seen this document in my life. I zoomed in. I leaned so close to the monitor that my nose almost touched the glass. The signature was good. It was terrifyingly good, but it was too perfect. It lacked the slight speed wobble of a pen moving across paper in a hurry. The pressure was uniform. It was a tracing, or a practice run. My mind raced back, rewinding the last month of my life, scanning for the moment the theft had happened. It hit me with the clarity of a gunshot. 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday night, Graham had come home early, complaining about a jammed printer at his office. He had asked to borrow my laptop, just to print the final proofs for the gala program. I was cooking dinner, distracted, stirring a sauce. He had come into the kitchen 10 minutes later, holding a stack of warm papers. "Hey, babe," he had said, that easy, charming smile plastered on his face. "While I have the printer running, do you mind signing these internal requisitions for the house? The cleaning service needs a renewed liability waiver, and the dog walker sent over a new contract." He had held the papers out on the granite counter. He held them down with his hand, keeping them flat, just pointing to the signature lines. "Sign here, and here. Just standard stuff." I had signed. I had not read. I was making dinner. I trusted the man holding the paper. I trusted the man who slept in my bed. I had signed a blank check for his mistress. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias immediately. It was late, but he picked up on the first ring. "Reagan? Did he try to come back to the apartment?" "No," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. "It is worse. He forged my signature on a credit guarantee. He made me the co-signer for Sloane's debt to the club." "Send it to me," Elias said instantly. "Right now." I forwarded the file. I could hear him opening it on his end. I heard the silence as he reviewed it. "This is not just a breach of contract anymore, Reagan," Elias said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "This is fraud. This is criminal forgery. If this document is in the club's official records, it means you are personally liable for the $25,000 she owes for the sponsorship package. And since her company is broke, the board will come after you for it." "He set me up," I whispered. "He did not just want to use my reputation. He wanted to use my liability insurance." "He built a trap," Elias corrected. "He knew Sloane couldn't pay. He knew the tax liens would freeze her accounts eventually. He needed a guarantor. He used you as a human shield." A notification chimed on my cell phone. It was not a text from Graham. It was from a number I did not recognize. A local area code. I opened the message. If you try to smear us, remember that your name is on the paperwork too. You signed off on the credit line. If we go down for fraud, you go down for negligence and collusion. Do not play the victim. Reagan, you are an accomplice. I stared at the screen. The message was not from Graham. The syntax was different. It was sharper, nastier. It was from Sloane. She wasn't the weeping, humiliated girl on the stage anymore. She was the cornered rat baring her teeth. She knew about the forged document. Of course she knew. She was probably the one who printed it. Reagan? Elias asked. Are you there? I just got a threat, I said. From Sloane. She says if I expose them, I go down for collusion because my signature is on the approval. Forward that text to me immediately, Elias ordered. Do not reply. Do not engage. This is blackmail. I forwarded the text. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned off, leaving only clarity. They thought they had me. They thought that because my signature was on the page, I would be too afraid of losing my job to expose the truth. They thought I would cover for them to save myself. They had made the classic mistake of underestimating their opponent. They thought I was a woman who feared scandal more than I valued integrity. Elias, I said, I am going to self-report. Excuse me? I am going to call the chairman. Tonight, I'm going to tell him about the forgery. I am going to request an independent forensic audit of the entire sponsorship package. Reagan, that is risky, Elias warned. If you admit your signature is on a fraudulent document, even if you say it is forged, the board might suspend you pending an investigation. You could lose your position. If I hide it, I am an accomplice, I said. If I reveal it, I am a victim. I would rather be a suspended victim than a fired conspirator. Graham thinks he has me in a checkmate. He thinks I will stay silent to protect my career. I am going to burn the board to save the game. You are a terrifying woman, Reagan Taylor, Elias said, and I could hear the admiration in his voice. Do it. Call Sterling. I will have a handwriting analyst ready by morning to prove that signature is a tracing. I hung up. I did not hesitate. I dialed Mr. Sterling's private line. He answered on the second ring, sounding groggy. Reagan, it is 11 o'clock. Is the building on fire? In a manner of speaking. Yes, I said. Mr. Sterling, I have uncovered a serious irregularity in the compliance files regarding the Mercer sponsorship. It appears there is a credit authorization document on file with my signature on it. And I did not sign it. There was a long pause. Are you telling me we have a forgery in our internal system? I am telling you that Graham Whitlock accessed my laptop under false pretenses and likely falsified an approval to bypass our payment protocols. I am requesting an immediate suspension of all accounts related to Mercer Brand Solutions, and I am formally requesting a third-party audit of my own department to clear my name. Reagan, Sterling said, his voice fully awake now, do you realize what you are asking for? An audit will freeze everything, the scholarship fund, the vendor payments. It will be a nightmare. It is better than a felony, I said. And Mr. Sterling? I just received a blackmail threat attempting to coerce my silence. I am forwarding it to you and the legal team now. I sent the screenshot of Sloane's text. Good Lord, Sterling muttered. Who are these people? They are grifters, sir, I said, and they made the mistake of trying to grift the wrong house. I will call the audit team, Sterling said, his tone grim. We will have forensic accountants there at 8 in the morning. Reagan, watch your back. If they are desperate enough to forge documents and send threats, they are desperate enough to do anything. I am not afraid of them, I said. I have the truth. They only have a bad photocopy. I hung up. I sat there in the silence of my office. The gala was over. The guests were gone. The cleaners were likely sweeping up the confetti on the terrace. But down here, in the dark, the real party was just getting started. Graham and Sloane had tried to weave a web. They had tried to trap me in a complex geometry of lies and financial leverage. They thought that by putting my name on the crime, they could force me to become their partner. But they had forgotten one thing. I was not just a signature on a page. I was the person who wrote the rulebook. I opened a new email. I addressed it to the entire board of directors. Subject: Formal complaint and request for criminal investigation. I began to type. I detailed the timeline. I detailed the unauthorized access to my computer. I detailed the text message. I detailed the specific discrepancies in the signature, the pressure points, the angle of the slant. I built a case so watertight that by the time the sun came up, Graham and Sloane would not just be social pariahs, they would be suspects. The scandal was no longer about who was sleeping with whom. It was no longer a romantic drama. It was a white-collar crime thriller, and I was the lead witness. I hit send. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were blurring below me. Somewhere out there, Graham was probably pacing in Sloane's apartment, telling her that it would be okay, that I would never dare to speak up, that I had too much to lose. He did not know that I had already lost the only thing that made me vulnerable to him: my trust. The audit would start in 9 hours. The forensic accountants would tear through every email, every file, every login record. They would find the truth. They would find that Graham Whitlock was a fraud. And when they did, I would be waiting, not as his girlfriend, not as his victim, but as the woman who handed the evidence to the district attorney. The text message from Sloane Mercer arrived at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was devoid of the bravado she had displayed on the stage, and it lacked the venom of her anonymous threats from the night before. It was just an address for a coffee shop on the edge of the financial district and a time, 3 o'clock. I did not have to go. My lawyer, Elias, would have advised against it. He would have told me that speaking to an opposing party without counsel is a tactical error. But I am not just a client. I am a woman who needed to look the other woman in the eye and determine if she was a co-conspirator or just another line item in Graham's ledger of casualties. I arrived at 2:55. I bought a black coffee and sat in the back corner, my back to the wall, watching the door. When Sloane walked in, I almost did not recognize her. The girl in the red dress, the one who had held the microphone like a weapon, was gone. In her place was a young woman wearing an oversized gray sweater and jeans, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, looking pale and hollowed out. She looked younger than 26. She looked like a college student who had just failed her finals and lost her scholarship in the same afternoon. She spotted me and hesitated. For a second, I thought she might turn and run, but she took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward my table. She did not buy a drink. She sat down opposite me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. "I did not think you would come," she said. Her voice was quiet, raspy. "I am curious by nature," I replied, my tone neutral. "And I assume you did not ask me here to discuss the weather." Sloane looked down at the table. "He lied to me too." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I learned long ago that if you wait long enough, people will fill the silence with the truth they are desperate to unload. "He told me you were roommates," Sloane whispered, finally looking up. Her eyes were rimmed with red. "He told me the relationship had been over for 6 months, but you were staying together for financial reasons until the lease was up. He said you were cold, that you were more like a business manager than a girlfriend. He said you did not care about him anymore." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "And you believed him?" "He was convincing," she said defensively, though the fight was weak. "He showed me separate bank accounts. He showed me texts where you were just talking about bills and schedules. He made it seem like you were just existing in the same space." "Graham is very good at curating reality," I said. "He showed you the logistics. He hid the intimacy." "He promised me," she said, her voice cracking. "He promised me that the gala was the end. He said he was going to break it off with you officially the morning after. He said the speech was supposed to be my moment. He told me to do it. He said, 'Go up there and claim what is yours. Reagan will be relieved to have it out in the open.'" I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a level of manipulation that bordered on sociopathic. Graham had not just cheated. He had orchestrated a public demolition of my dignity, using Sloane as the wrecking ball, all while telling her it was a romantic gesture. "He set you up to be the villain," I said, "and he set me up to be the victim, and he thought he would walk away with the sympathy of the crowd." "I know that now." Sloane wiped a tear from her cheek. "I saw the way he looked at me when I came off that stage. He looked at me like I was a disease. He did not come to find me. He ran after you." "He ran after his security blanket," I corrected. "Graham does not love people. Sloane, he loves safety, and I was his safety." I leaned forward, placing my elbows on the table. It was time to ask the question that had been keeping me awake since I found the forged guarantee. "The money," I said. "The transfers, the loans you gave him, the sponsorship fee you could not afford. Did you do that because you are a con artist? Or did you do that because you thought you were investing in a future husband?" Sloane flinched. She looked at her hands. "My company is in trouble. You know that. Everyone knows that now. Graham said he could fix it. He said if I sponsored the gala, he could get me clients. He said he needed the money up front to grease the wheels with the board. He said it was a loan. He said we were building an empire together." "So you paid him," I said. "I gave him everything I had," she admitted, the tears finally spilling over. "I maxed out my business credit cards. I borrowed from my parents. I thought we were partners. I thought I was helping him get away from a controlling ex so we could start our life." She looked at me, pleading for understanding. "I did not know he was stealing from you to pay me back. I swear, I thought he had his own money." I looked at her. I saw the desperation. I saw the naivety. A part of me, the part that was still human, wanted to reach out and pat her hand. She was just another victim of the Graham Whitlock charm offensive. But I was not here to be human. I was here to be a prosecutor. "I do not want your apology, Sloane," I said, my voice hard. "And I do not want your tears. You are an adult. You signed a contract with a man you did not vet. That is bad business." Sloane stiffened. "However," I continued, "I do not believe you are the mastermind behind the forgery. I believe you were the desperate signatory, but I need proof." Sloane reached into her bag. Her hand was trembling as she pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and then slid it across the table to me. "Read the thread from last Thursday," she said. I looked down. It was a text conversation between my love, Graham, and Sloane. Sloane: "I am worried about the sponsorship paperwork. Babe, the bank is asking for a guarantor. I cannot sign this alone." Graham: "Don't worry about it. I handled it." Sloane: "How? You said your credit was tied up." Graham: "I used Reagan's profile. She signs whatever I put in front of her. She is so busy playing boss lady she doesn't even read half the stuff I give her. It is hilarious. She thinks she is so smart, but she is blind." I stared at the words. She signs whatever I put in front of her. It is hilarious. The air in the coffee shop seemed to vanish. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharper than the infidelity, sharper than the public humiliation. It was the contempt. He did not just cheat on me because he was weak or tempted. He cheated on me because he thought I was stupid. He thought my trust was a defect. He thought my dedication to my job, the very job that paid his rent and bought his clothes, was a joke. He had sat across from me at the dinner table, watched me sign those papers, and laughed internally at how easy it was to fool the smart Reagan Taylor. I had spent 2 years thinking we were equals. He had spent 2 years thinking I was a mark. I handed the phone back to her. My hand was steady, but my insides were frozen. "Send that screenshot to my lawyer," I said. "Right now." "I will," Sloane said quietly. Does this mean you will not sue me?" "It means I will focus my fire," I said. "I am not interested in destroying a woman who has already destroyed herself. I am interested in the man who held the match." I stood up. I did not offer to pay for her coffee. I did not shake her hand. I do not need you to be on my side. Sloane, I said, looking down at her, I do not want your friendship. I want your testimony. When the auditors come, you tell them exactly what you told me. You tell them about the promise. You tell them about the money, and you show them that text. I will, she whispered. Good. I walked out of the coffee shop. I felt lighter, but also colder. The mask had fallen completely now. Graham was not a tragic romantic figure. He was a predator who fed on competence. I returned to my office to find that the war had moved to a new front. My assistant, Sarah, met me at the door, looking anxious. Reagan, you need to see this. It is circulating on the donor gossip chain. She handed me her tablet. It was a screenshot of a private Facebook post from a prominent socialite, referencing a conversation with Graham. Just spoke to poor Graham Whitlock. Apparently, there is two sides to every story. He says he has been trying to leave Reagan for months, but she threatened to ruin his career if he walked, said she is emotionally abusive and controlling, calls her the Ice Queen of Hawthorne Vale, says the forgery accusation is just her way of punishing him for falling in love with someone else. Scary what a woman with power will do when she is rejected. I read it twice. He was pivoting. He knew the financial evidence was damning. So he was attacking my character. He was leaning into the crazy ex-girlfriend trope. He was betting that the world would find it easier to believe that a successful, stern woman was an abuser than to believe a charming man was a thief. He is trying to flip the narrative, Sarah said indignantly. He is calling you cold. He is saying you forced him to stay. Let him talk, I said calmly, handing the tablet back. But Reagan, people are reading this. Some of the board members might believe him. He is very likable. Likable is not a legal defense, Sarah. Just then, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, a member of the board whom I had always considered neutral, a man of few words and strict logic. Reagan, he said, skipping the pleasantries. I just had an interesting lunch with Graham. He caught me outside the athletic club. He is quite distraught. I imagine he is, I said. He told me a very moving story about how you controlled his every move. Henderson continued. How you monitored his spending, how you forced him to sign agreements, how you threatened him. He says the signature on the guarantee is real, but that you forced him to bring the deal in and now you are denying it to save face. And what did you say? I asked, bracing myself. I asked him a simple question, Henderson said. I asked him, Graham, if she is so controlling, if she monitors every detail so closely, and if she is so cold and calculating, then why on earth did you need to forge her signature? A controlling woman signs her own checks. I paused. A small, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in days. And what did he say? He stuttered, Henderson said. He did not have an answer. Liars never do when you hit them with logic. I just thought you should know. Reagan, the board is not a collection of fools. We know the difference between a manager and a monster. Thank you. Mr. Henderson, I said. That means a great deal. We are still proceeding with the audit, he added, his voice returning to business. But between you and me, I think the numbers are going to tell a very different story than his Facebook posts. I hung up the phone. Graham was flailing. He was throwing mud at a wall of glass, hoping something would stick. But he had forgotten that I lived in a glass house by choice, because I had nothing to hide. He called me cold. He called me calculating. He thought those were insults. He was wrong. In a crisis. Cold is not an insult. It is a survival strategy, and calculating is just another word for prepared. I sat down at my desk and opened the file for the upcoming hearing. I printed the screenshot Sloane had sent me. She signs whatever I put in front of her. I placed it right next to the forged guarantee. He wanted to argue about feelings. He wanted to make this a trial of the heart. I was going to make it a trial of the facts. I picked up my pen and wrote a single note on the top of the file. The question is not why he left. The question is what he took. The final showdown was coming. And I was not bringing tissues. I was bringing receipts. The boardroom of the Hawthorne Vale Society is designed to intimidate. It is a chamber of dark walnut paneling, heavy velvet drapes, and a silence so profound that you can hear the hum of the air conditioning unit 3 floors down. Usually, this room is reserved for discussing multi-million-dollar endowments or the architectural future of our historic building, today. However, it was the setting for a much grimmer kind of accounting. Graham Whitlock stood at the far end of the long table. He had been granted a special, one-time dispensation to enter the building for this inquiry, a fact that seemed to chafe against his ego. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he usually reserved for closing major clients, but it hung slightly loose on his frame. His characteristic tan had faded into a sickly, grayish pallor, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. He looked like a man who had not slept since the gala. I sat at the opposite end of the table, flanked by the chairman, Mr. Sterling, and the head of the audit committee. I did not look at Graham. I looked at the file folder in front of me, my hands resting calmly on the leather cover. Mr. Whitlock, Sterling began, his voice dry and devoid of warmth. We are here to clarify the nature of your relationship with Mercer Brand Solutions. Our internal review suggests a significant conflict of interest regarding the sponsorship package you facilitated. Graham straightened his tie, flashing a tight, practiced smile. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the opportunity to clear this up. I think there has been a massive misunderstanding. My relationship with Ms. Mercer is complex. We are close friends. I was simply trying to help a young female entrepreneur get a leg up in a competitive industry. I believe in her vision. There was no malicious intent here, just a desire to see a friend succeed. He paused, letting the word friend hang in the air, soft and harmless. He was trying to paint this as a charitable act, a mentorship gone wrong. He was betting on the fact that these men, old money traditionalists, would understand the impulse to help a pretty young woman. We were not business partners, Graham continued, his voice gaining a little more confidence. There is no formal business link between us. I have no equity in her company. The assistance I provided was personal, not professional. Therefore, the conflict of interest policies do not apply. It was a good speech. It was plausible. If I had been anyone else, I might have bought it. Reagan? Sterling turned to me. Do you have any comments? I opened the folder. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I simply slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood toward the center of the table. Timeline, I said. Item 4. The audit director picked up the paper and adjusted his glasses. He read aloud, his voice monotone. October 12th. Wire transfer of $2,500 from the personal account of Graham Whitlock to the business operating account of Mercer Brand Solutions. Memo line. Payroll coverage. Graham flinched. His eyes darted to the paper. Item 5, I said. November 1st, the director read. Direct payment of $1,200 to the landlord of the commercial property registered to Mercer Brand Solutions. Payment made via credit card ending in 4498. That is the card linked to the Society's emergency authorization file, I added quietly, which Mr. Whitlock had access to via our domestic partnership. Item 6, I continued, relentless. November 15th, an email from Mr. Whitlock to Ms. Mercer. Subject line, equity split. Content reads, once the gala contract is signed, we can leverage the exposure to secure the Series A funding. My 30% stake will be vested upon the first client acquisition. The room went dead silent. Graham's face crumbled. The mask of the benevolent mentor dissolved, revealing the panic of a caught thief. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You stated you had no equity, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. You stated this was a personal friendship. This email suggests you were a silent partner attempting to use our donor base to launch a venture in which you held a 30% interest. It was hypothetical, Graham stammered, sweat visible on his brow. We were just brainstorming. It was never formalized. The intent was formalized, I said, looking at him for the first time. My gaze was not angry, it was clinical. And the funds were transferred. You invested nearly $6,000 of misappropriated household funds into a company that is currently insolvent. And you attempted to use the Hawthorne Vale Society as your launchpad to recoup that investment. I closed the folder. This is not a misunderstanding. Gentlemen, this is an unauthorized commercial operation conducted within our walls, funded by debt, and disguised as charity. Graham looked around the room. Searching for an ally, he found none. The board members were not looking at him with sympathy. They were looking at him like he was a bad investment. I moved to immediately suspend all pending contracts with Mercer Brand Solutions, the vice chairman said, not even looking up from his notes. And I moved to refer this file to our external forensic auditors for a complete liability assessment. Agreed, Sterling said. Mr. Whitlock, this inquiry is concluded. Security will escort you out. If you attempt to contact any member of this board again, our legal counsel will file harassment charges. Graham looked at me one last time. His eyes were wide, pleading, filled with a mixture of shock and hatred. He could not believe that the woman who used to fold his laundry was now dismantling his life with a spreadsheet. He turned and walked out, his footsteps heavy and uneven on the plush carpet. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing his fate. The meeting adjourned shortly after. I walked back to my office, feeling a strange, hollow vibration in my chest. It was the feeling of a tension wire being pulled so tight it was about to snap. I knew this wasn't over. Graham was cornered, and cornered animals do not just go away, they bite. I worked late, wrapping up the post-gala reports. Ensuring every number was perfect, I left the building at 9 o'clock. The city was dark, a grid of yellow lights against the black sky. I took a cab home. My apartment building was a pre-war structure with a heavy iron gate and a marble lobby. I nodded to the night doorman, a new hire who did not know Graham, and took the elevator to the 6th floor. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and there he was. Graham was sitting on the floor outside my apartment door, his back against the wall, his long legs stretched out across the hallway runner. He was holding a bottle of wine, my favorite vintage, and a small, black velvet box. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a sudden, sharp exhaustion. I did not want this scene. I wanted a hot shower and silence. He scrambled to his feet when he saw me. "Reagan, you are trespassing," I said, keeping my hand on the elevator door, ready to retreat. "I told the building management you were not allowed up here." "I waited for someone to come out and slipped in the door," he admitted, his voice ragged. "I had to see you. Please, just 5 minutes." He looked pathetic. The arrogance from the boardroom was gone. He looked like the man I had fallen in love with 2 years ago, vulnerable, handsome, looking at me as if I were the only person in the world. It was his best performance yet. "Go home, Graham," I said. "This is my home," he cried, stepping forward. "Reagan, look at this. Look at us. We are a team. We built this life together. You cannot just throw it away because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Graham, you forged my signature. You stole my money. You humiliated me in front of 200 people. That is not a mistake. That is a campaign." "I was panicked," he pleaded. "I was in over my head with Sloane. She was pressuring me. I did not know how to get out. But I never stopped loving you, Reagan. I bought this months ago." He held up the black velvet box. He cracked it open. Inside, nestled in white satin, was a diamond ring. It was a solitaire, simple and elegant. It was exactly the kind of ring I had once told him I wanted. "I was going to ask you," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I was going to ask you after the gala. I wanted to clear the debt with Sloane so we could start fresh. I did it all for us. Please, marry me. Let me fix this. We can go to the board together. We can tell them we are engaged. They will understand." I looked at the ring. A month ago, That ring would have made me cry with joy. A month ago, I would have seen it as a promise of forever. Now, under the harsh hallway lights, I just saw a piece of compressed carbon purchased by a man who thought he could buy his way out of consequences. I looked at his face. He really believed it. He really believed that a diamond was a magic eraser that could wipe away the fraud, the lies, the betrayal. He thought I was just a woman waiting to be chosen, that my anger would evaporate the moment he dropped to one knee. "You really do not know me at all, do you?" I asked softly. "I know you," he insisted. "You are the woman I love." "No," I said. "I am the woman you used." I took a step closer, looking down at the ring in his trembling hand. "Do you honestly believe that a small circle can cover a mountain of holes?" I asked. "Do you think that metal band is strong enough to hold together a life you took a sledgehammer to?" He froze. "Reagan, that ring is not a promise." "Graham," I said, "it is a bribe, and I do not take bribes." I turned back to the elevator and pressed the call button. "Leave, or I call the police, and this time I will press charges for stalking." Graham stood there for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. Then, with a sound of pure frustration, he snapped the box shut and shoved it into his pocket. He did not look at me again. He stormed past me to the stairwell, kicking the door open and disappearing into the concrete echo of the descent. I went inside my apartment and locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I engaged the chain. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elias. "You need to see this." Attached was a news alert from a legal blog. Investor Group files. Class action suit against Mercer Brand Solutions for fraudulent misrepresentation. I clicked the link. The article detailed how 3 angel investors, who had put seed money into Sloan's agency based on falsified revenue projections, were suing her. The lawsuit alleged that Sloan had claimed to have secured a major partnership with the Hawthorne Vale Society to justify the valuation. When the board suspended the contracts today, her house of cards collapsed. I read on. The investors were naming Graham Whitlock as a co-defendant, citing him as the de facto financial officer who had prepared the misleading documents. Sloan had not just lost her business. She was facing bankruptcy and potential jail time, and in her desperation, she had likely handed over every text, every email, every lie Graham had ever told her to save her own skin. She had realized she was just a human shield, and now she was stepping out of the line of fire. Graham had tried to play us both. He had tried to use my reputation to fund her business, and her business to feed his ego. Now, we were the jaws of the trap, and he was the leg caught in between. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window. Another notification popped up. This one was from Sarah, my assistant. It leaked. She sent a link to a private industry forum, a message board used by event planners and high-level executive assistants in the city. There was a video file attached. It was the clip from the gala. Title: How Not to Do a Toast. The Implosion at Hawthorne Vale. I watched it. The audio was crisp. Sloane's voice was clear. And then, my voice. My lawyer is currently drafting a suit. The comments section was brutal, but they were not mocking me. That is the coldest shutdown I have ever seen. Respect. Who is the guy? He looks like he's going to vomit. Note to self: never cross Reagan Taylor. That guy is Graham Whitlock. I heard he just got fired from his firm this morning. The video had gone viral within our specific, influential ecosystem. Graham's reputation was not just damaged, it was incinerated. In our world, you can survive a divorce, you can survive a bad business deal, but you cannot survive being publicly exposed as a fool and a fraud. He was finished. He would never work in high finance in this city again. I put the phone down. I should have felt triumphant. I should have popped a bottle of champagne. But revenge is not a party. It is a job. And the job was not done yet. There was still one loose end, the forged guarantee, the criminal act. The board had scheduled a final disciplinary hearing for Friday. It was not just for Graham, it was for me. I had to formally present the findings of the independent audit to clear my name once and for all. It would be the final seal on the tomb of our relationship. Graham would be there, legally compelled to attend to answer for the forgery. Sloane had been subpoenaed to testify. It would be the first time all three of us were in a room together since the night of the party. I looked at the empty space on the mantel where the picture of us used to sit. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard certainty of what had to happen next. I was not going to just win. I was going to set a precedent. I went to my bedroom and laid out my clothes for Friday. A white suit, sharp, clean, untouchable. The drama was over. The thriller was ending. Now, it was time for the verdict. The conference room where the final hearing took place was sterile, stripped of the mahogany warmth of the boardroom or the personal clutter of an office. It was a neutral ground, a place where careers went to die under the harsh hum of fluorescent lights. This was not a trial in a criminal court, though the threat of one hung heavy in the air. This was binding arbitration, a clause in my employment contract and a requirement of the society bylaws when financial malfeasance is alleged. I sat on the right side of the long glass table. I wore a white suit, tailored and sharp, a visual rejection of the morning black I had worn the night of the gala. Elias sat beside me, his posture relaxed, a predator who knew the prey was already limping. On the left side sat Graham. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. His suit was wrinkled, his tie slightly askew, and he kept running a hand through his hair. A nervous tic I had not seen since he lost a major client 6 months into our relationship. Beside him sat a court-appointed representative, as he could no longer afford private counsel after his firing, and at the far end of the table, isolated like a contagion, sat Sloane. She was accompanied by her own lawyer, a young woman who looked ready to cut a deal before the coffee was even poured. The arbitrator, a retired judge named Mr. Vance, adjusted his glasses and looked at the three factions. "We are here to resolve two distinct but intersecting matters." "Mr." Vance said, his voice gravelly. "First, the alleged breach of the cohabitation agreement and misappropriation of joint funds by Mr. Whitlock. Second, the internal investigation regarding the fraudulent sponsorship guarantees and the violation of the Hawthorne Vale Society's Vendor Ethics Code." Graham cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may," he started, his voice trembling slightly. "This entire proceeding is an overreaction. It is a domestic dispute that has spilled over into the workplace. Reagan is upset about the end of our relationship, and she is using the club's bylaws to punish me." Elias did not even look up from his notes. He simply pressed a button on the laptop in front of him. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was the footage from the gala. The audio was crisp, cutting through the silence of the room. We watched Sloane step onto the stage. We saw the red dress. We saw the arrogant tilt of her head. And then, we heard the words that would hang Graham Whitlock. "I want to thank Reagan for being so oblivious, for not knowing that Graham has actually been with me for the last 5 months." The video played on. We saw Graham's face in high definition. We saw the blood drain from his cheeks. We saw the sheer, unadulterated terror in his eyes. It was not the face of a man in on a joke. It was the face of a man watching his life implode. Elias paused the video right on that frame. "Mr. Whitlock," Elias said, his voice smooth, "you claimed in your initial statement that this event was a, quote, comedic roast intended to announce an amicable breakup, unquote." "Yes," Graham said, sweating. "It was bad judgment. Sure, but it was a skit." Elias pointed to the frozen screen. "Does that look like the face of a man enjoying a skit? Or does it look like a man realizing that his mistress just confessed to a timeline that contradicts his financial disclosures?" Graham opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Elias continued, "Let us look at the timeline. Ms. Mercer states on camera that you had been together for 5 months. During those 5 months, you transferred a total of $8,400 from the joint household account, funds designated for mortgage and utilities, to Ms. Mercer. Under the terms of the cohabitation agreement you signed, this constitutes theft. I never stole anything, Graham protested. It was a loan. I intended to pay it back. With what funds? Elias asked. Your personal accounts were overdrawn. And according to this text message thread provided by Miss Mercer, Elias clicked the next slide. The text message Sloane had shown me in the coffee shop appeared on the screen. 10 feet tall. She signs whatever I put in front of her. It is hilarious. She thinks she is so smart, but she is blind. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at Graham. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. He turned slowly to look at Sloane. Sloane did not look back. She was staring fixedly at the water pitcher on the table. This text, Elias said, reading it aloud for effect, proves two things. First, it proves premeditation regarding the forgery of the credit guarantee. You explicitly stated that you were manipulating Reagan into signing documents. Second, it proves malice. You were not a partner seeking a loan. You were a con man mocking his mark. I sat perfectly still. Seeing those words on the screen hurt less today than they had in the coffee shop. Today, they were just data. They were the nails in the coffin. Mr. Vance looked at the screen, then at Graham. Mr. Whitlock, do you deny sending this message? Graham slumped in his chair. No, Mr. Vance made a note. And the signature on the credit guarantee? The forensic handwriting analysis confirms it is a tracing, not an original wet signature. Graham looked at me. For a second, I saw a flash of the old Graham, the one who thought he could charm his way out of a burning building. Reagan, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I did it for us. I thought if I could get Sloane's company off the ground, we would have the money for the house, for the wedding. I was trying to be the provider you wanted. I looked at him. I did not blink. You were not trying to provide. Graham, I said, my voice steady. You were trying to leverage. You used my name as collateral for a gamble I did not agree to make. That is not love. That is fraud. Mr. Vance banged his gavel lightly. The sentiment is noted, but the facts are clear. The ruling came down swift and hard. Graham was ordered to repay the full amount of $8,400 to me within 30 days. He was stripped of all rights to the apartment and ordered to pay the remaining lease termination fee. But the society's judgment was worse. He was permanently banned from the Hawthorne Vale Society and all its affiliate clubs. His name was entered into the citywide vendor blacklist for unethical conduct and forgery. He was effectively exiled from the social and professional circle he had spent 10 years trying to infiltrate. Then, Mr. Vance turned to Sloane. Ms. Mercer, he said, regarding the outstanding debt of $25,000 for the sponsorship package. Sloane's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, Ms. Mercer would like to enter a statement of cooperation. She admits to the debt, but she asserts that she was acting under the direct instruction of Mr. Whitlock, who assured her that the fees would be waived due to his personal relationship with the director. Sloane stood up. Her voice was shaking, but she spoke clearly. He told me how to do it, she said, refusing to look at Graham. He told me to come to the gala. He told me to make the speech. He said we needed a big moment to launch the brand. He wrote the speech for me. He said Reagan was too professional to cause a scene and that the publicity would get me clients. I was following his plan. Graham shot out of his chair. You liar. You wanted the fame. You begged me to get you in. Sit down. Mr. Whitlock? Mr. Vance barked. Sloane continued, tears running down her face. I signed the affidavit. I have the emails where he edited the speech. He directed the whole thing. He wanted to humiliate her to boost me. I looked at Graham. He was breathing hard, looking like a trapped animal. The truth was out. It was not just an affair. It was a production. He had written the script for my humiliation. Mr. Vance nodded. Given Mrs. Mercer's cooperation and the evidence that she was manipulated regarding the fee structure, the society agrees to a payment plan for her debt. However, her company is barred from future sponsorship. The gavel banged one last time. This hearing is adjourned. The room exhaled. It was over. I stood up. I did not look at Graham. I gathered my files, shook Elias's hand, and walked toward the door. "Reagan!" Graham called out. I did not stop. I walked out into the hallway, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking on the marble. A rhythmic sound of finality. I did not feel like cheering. I did not feel like popping champagne. I felt the specific, heavy relief of setting down a suitcase I had been carrying for miles. I took the elevator down to the lobby. As I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the board of directors. Subject: Approval of the Taylor Scholarship Fund. Dear Reagan, following the conclusion of the audit and the resolution of the recent security breach, the board has unanimously voted to fully fund the Taylor Scholarship. Your swift handling of the crisis demonstrated the exact kind of leadership and integrity this fund represents. We are proud to have you at the helm. I stopped on the sidewalk. I looked at the screen. The tears I had refused to shed for Graham finally pricked my eyes for this. My mother's name would be on a plaque. Her legacy would help students like she once was. It was clean. It was safe. It was done. I took a deep breath of the city air. It smelled of exhaust and roasted nuts and freedom. My phone buzzed again. One last email. From Graham Whitlock. Subject: Please read, Reagan. I am sitting in my car. I do not know where to go. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But you have to know that I never wanted to lose you. I got lost. I got greedy. But what we had was real. Please, do not let this be the end. I am nothing without you. It was long. It was rambling. It was the last gasp of a man who realized too late that he had bet the house and lost. I typed a reply. I did not hesitate. My fingers moved with the certainty of a woman who knew her own worth. You are mistaken about one thing. Graham, I did not lose you. I reclaimed myself. I hit send. Then, I blocked his email. I blocked his number. I blocked his name from my life. I put the phone in my pocket and looked down the street. The autumn leaves were turning gold. The air was crisp. The gala season was starting again next week. There would be new parties, new donors, new crises to manage. But for the first time in 2 years, I was walking into the season without a shadow standing next to me. I adjusted my white jacket, lifted my chin, and stepped into the crowd. I was lighter. I was cleaner. And I was finally completely the author of my own story. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. It was a long journey for Reagan, but she finally got the closure she deserved. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute? At the gym? Or maybe relaxing at home? Please leave a comment below with your location and let me know what you thought of Reagan's final move. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Leona Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this satisfying revenge with even more people. Until next time, stay sharp and know your worth.